Welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I hope we're not killing each other. I am your host, Corey Nathan. It's an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've been sharing the video of these conversations over there. We're getting some nice engagement. And definitely follow us, review us, join our Patreon, all that stuff. We have links in the show notes to make it all easy to find. And it really does help so we can continue having just important, engaging conversations like the one we're having today as part of our Meet the Majority series. As you might remember, we talked to my dear friend Natalie, who I grew up with in Jersey and maintain a really nice friendship with. But she and I have come to very different conclusions about the last few elections, at least at the top of the ticket. And we're having another one of these conversations today. So let me just take a second to hit the refresh button, say why we're doing this. Again, the election results came as a surprise to a lot of people, and for a little less than half the country, it came as a great disappointment. And while there's been an increasing tendency over the last number of years to categorize anyone who votes differently than we do as one of them, like they're all one big group, our opponents, and they all think the same way and have a certain set of beliefs that are all the same, that are different than ours, than us, whoever the us or the we might be in this line of thinking. The truth is a lot more complex. And I, for one, refuse to write off all 70-something million people who happen to check a different box than I did in this last election. Because many of them are friends or relatives, coworkers, neighbors. And some of them, let's face it, for one reason or another, I really don't want to have anything to do with them. But that's the exception. Seriously, many of them I don't want to give up on. And I've been coming to understand that there are many different people who came to a different conclusion this last year. And among them are a number of people I love and respect, all of them having different reasons for voting the way they did. So I'm having these conversations partly to help me understand, but partly to get better at having these conversations. Not that the point is to convince friends and loved ones to vote differently or to agree with me, although that could happen. Or maybe I'll arrive at some new epiphany and change my mind about something. The point is to stay at the table. As my new friend, Rabbi Sharon Brous, would put it, stay at the table, stay in the relationship, stay in the conversation, stay curious. And if I am arguing with anyone or anything, it's with the notion that we all hate each other, that there are only two sides to any given issue or election, and that we have to continue hating all those people on the other side. So again, it's about curiosity, not contentiousness. It's about nurturing our relationships to take more prominence than any specific disagreement, and to really try to understand each other more so than trying to change each other or dominate each other. So I hope that all makes sense. And with that, let's, without any further ado, let's dive in. Today's guest is someone I've described as that friend that everyone should have. It's that friend that if you call them in the middle of the night and you say you need to bury a body, they don't ask questions. They just put their shoes on and say, okay, let's go. And that's my pal, Brandon. Brandon, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Corey, happy to be here.
Thanks for doing this. It's really nice of you to take the time and have this conversation. I thought a good way to start might be to tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, a little bit about your family, where you live now, what you do, or whatever you want to tell us.
Sure. Well, I am 50 years old, and this year, actually, I was born in Jersey, not far from you, I think. Lakewood, I don't even know the city, but and then transplanted out here to California when I was 6 months old, and I've been in California my whole life. Santa Clarita resident for about 46 years of my 50. I'm a father of four. I've been married to my beautiful wife, Stephanie, for 25 years. My employment background is I've worked at UPS for a while, but I was in sales at Kraft Foods, which is Mondelez International. Back then, it was Nabisco for 20 years. And for the last, 11 years, I've been a general manager at C-Spaco Window Cleaning, not the whole time, but certainly for the last several years, I've been general manager at C-Spaco Window Cleaning and Pressure Washing here in Santa Clarita. I'm a lifelong Reaganite, so just to put it to you that way. Although I have voted for a Democrat president once, so I do think myself as being open to options, especially if something's not working on either side. But my parents were basically, Reagan millionaires in the 80s. Then when W1 came and the recession came, I switched over to not my party, but I did switch my presidential pick, and I voted for Clinton, which I tell all my Republican friends. But as of right now, I consider myself a staunch Republican, and I don't want to say a hater of liberals, but I definitely combat liberalism. So that's kind of where I stand. I'm strong on national security, strong on national pride, and and core values to me that I have are don't lie to me, don't lie to my friends, or my friend will call you in the middle of the night, ask me to come get a body. And I think with you, the second time you called me probably, but anyway, that's me. But I'm just a regular guy. I like sports. I like poker. I like to mix it up. And I think what for me is I enjoy the discourse. So I appreciate this as far as staying at the table. I do like to mix it up, but I also like to stay at the table with people that I care about, people that I don't even know. Because I look at it as we're all Americans, so it should be all good.
Yeah. So two things, there are a lot of questions about that, but two things that might be related. One is you didn't mention that your family, are you second generation Puerto Rican?
I am fourth generation Puerto Rican.
Oh,
So
so I thought your grandmother was from Puerto Rico.
my grandmother is from Puerto Rico, and my great grandparents are from Puerto Rico. So
Was your mom born there?
no, my mother and my father were born in New York in the Bronx, and then both sets of my grandparents on my parents' side and their great grandparents were from Puerto Rico.
So New Yorkers.
New Ricans. Now I'm an LA Rican, which there's few of us, but we're out there.
So the second question, and it's kind of related in a way to the first question, is you're very much against liberalism or progressivism, I guess you could say, because classical liberalism, you probably sign on to a lot of those philosophical moorings, but liberals, as we come to understand it, progressives is what you're very much against.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't want to say that I'm against like policy wise. I'm more against the attitude that I'm foreseeing over the maybe since Obama came. So I would say the last 12 out of the last 16 years. I mean, that's where I've really come to disdain the attitude that comes with what I perceive as liberalism.
Which how would you describe it?
I would describe it kind of like as pedantic, attitude of talking down to less than, you're not smart enough. You don't understand. If you don't agree, then, you're uneducated, a misogynist, a racist. Um, you know, I'm, my parents were interracial. Well, my stepfather, who raised me. I'm in an interracial marriage. So when I get called a racist, because I don't vote for liberals, I find that it doesn't really. I don't find it amusing. I actually find it disgusting, and I disdain it. So, but I would say that kind of stuff. I'm not really with the woke culture that's going on right now. I'm not really with that. Only in the fact that I think it's very black and white as far as your chromosomes. But I would just say that that attitude that was until recently taking over the country, I would say I don't like that at all.
Do you think that there is the pendulum swinging back at all, or do you still see that the Democratic Party in particular is really still dominated by woke sensibilities?
Well, I think Trump pretty much obliterated it. Like, not that it's gone, but it's kind of like a wasteland, I think, right now for the Democrats. As to where I believe they tied that to winning the election. You know, Not all the way, but I see two things that they tied to winning the election. The last two elections was abortion and wokeism, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think although abortion I think did well for them and Biden when Biden won, but wokeism I don't think was as prevalent. And in this election, they really made it an issue Well, actually, to be honest with you, I think the Republicans made it an issue, um, and Democrats just they got their behinds handed to them, so to speak, in that aspect. So I think it's a wasteland as far as Democrats go. Getting back to your question, and I think I hope that not that they need to abandon it, but I think they need to redirect their party's priorities as far as the national perspective and what the majority wants.
So, if I may, I see some of the same tendencies, but they wear a different costume when it comes to Trumpism or MAGA. In particular, a cancel culture of a different sort. So the way the party reacted to people like Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger, or even, the folks who started the Bulwark and the Dispatch and a lot of the media outlets that I follow most closely, or people like me. For a long time, I've been considered, some sort of lefty, even though I'm like a Jack Kemp, Paul Ryan type conservative, because I don't know, it feels like I don't hate liberals enough. I don't hate Democrats enough. And that alone gets me confused. Like the cancel culture kicked in, but it has a different set of qualifications. Instead of talking about, identity issues, race issues, there are a different set of priorities or different set of qualifications that either you have to abide by, or you're basically excommunicated from the tribe. You know what I mean? Is that fair to say, or do you see
No,
something different?
I also think like for you, I think you're what I've been seeing with you as my friend for the last I don't know 3 or 4 years is that you're holding on to a middle that I don't think exists anymore.
Mm,
So, and I think that came to fruition in the election. I think, although I don't think I think there's a place for the middle. I just think that the middle that you thought was there is not there, and I think it showed by Trump taking the White House and by both houses being flipped, the Senate and and Congress. So I don't think that the middle's there anymore. So I think for somebody like you and really a large number of Americans, it's either right or left, which I don't think is a good place for us to be. For people who like yourself and many people who, they agree with some things, but it doesn't have to be all or the other. But right now, after the election, it really is right or left. I feel. So I don't know if that answered your question completely, but
yeah, yeah. So expound a little bit on the middle. Help me understand how, like, your perception of, or maybe how you're interpreting where you think a guy like me is in terms of like what is the middle? What does that look like?
I think the middle is, like I think you're fiscally conservative, to a certain point. So I think that doesn't really land you in the left bucket, like the far left bucket. I know you're disdain for like AOC and the squad, so that definitely doesn't put you, in the left bucket. So but then I also know you're disdain for Trump.
Yeah.
So that really puts you in the right bucket, So and I know like, we will differ on things as far as, maybe immigration, and maybe some certain brass tax policies. But what I'm seeing now is that puts you can't be either or as far as the parties are concerned. Like there's no place for you because I feel like the liberals want it either all one way or the other, and the right has it all way one way or the other right now, for at least for the next 2 years. So therefore, I think the middle maybe was there, but I think Trump destroyed the middle on November 6th.
All right. So if you want to say whether it's clear that you didn't vote for the Democrat in this last election, if you want to say whether you voted for Trump or not, or wrote in a candidate, I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, no, I did vote for Trump this time.
Okay.
I went Republican across the board.
Yeah.
I think I did. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I went Republican across the board.
My propositions, I've probably voted a lot more like you. The California propositions, I probably voted because we have similar interests. We have similar business
It's
interests.
an interesting point, man, because I think a lot of my national politics are from the view of a Republican who's behind the lines in California.
Yeah.
So I think prop wise, you vote more towards the right, like I do, and I don't know if that would be acceptable, nationally for liberalism.
Yeah.
So I think that's where you get, or I mean, not just you, but that's where like the middle gets, I don't know, hamstrung or frustrated, or even possibly disenfranchised because here we vote for what we believe is sanity, but like, I mean, I see the left as wanting California politics as for the nation, and I just can't handle that.
Right.
I can't do it.
So yeah, and you're right. Like at the state level, I got excoriated by this guy named Pete Dominic on the show a couple of years ago because I said that I supported Suzette Valladares when she was running for assembly or to get reelected in the assembly a couple of years ago. And as you know, I strongly supported her as a Republican
Right.
for state senate here. One of the reasons I was able to strongly support her is because she departed from her party on a couple of key issues. She did sign on to Governor Newsom's constitutional amendment to protect a woman's right to choose. She also opened her campaign by saying Trump is not the future of our party. Now, she may be wrong. She may have been wrong about that, but a year and a half ago now, when she started her campaign for state senate, I said, I want more of a Kempian conservative, somebody who's not a MAGA conservative or Trumpian conservative. So that gave me that told me, number one, she's bold enough to say in that room, her biggest financial supporters. I wasn't her biggest financial supporter, but she had her biggest financial supporters in that room. Probably a lot of them who have MAGA hats and MAGA bumper stickers and MAGA flags in front of their house. She was bold enough to say in that room that she was not a Trump Republican. She was an old school Reagan. That was one of the reasons I signed on to that. At the same time, however, I am at the national level, to your point. I have concerns about the future of our democratic republic. And Trump's actions and his record thus far give me great pause about the future of this republic. January 6th, obviously being one highlight, but everything he said, everything he's done leading up to that time and since that time has given me no indication. Just if we look at the First Amendment, the freedoms articulated in the First Amendment, that those are of high value to him, let alone the fact that they are in very concrete threat in some instances. Freedom of
Well,
press, freedom of
that's
speech.
where the majority spoke to you there. That the majority, I think, when it comes to Trump, man, I'll just put it for me, anyways. Um, like I feel pushed to the right more so, and I wouldn't consider myself MAGA because you and I've had many conversations about Trump. Like I don't have any misgivings, or
Yeah.
I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. However, um, I've been pushed to a place where he's my only option as far as getting rid of the insanity of liberalism. Not getting rid of, but changing the insanity of liberalism by his presidency. The Democratic Party has to change, and if they don't, they're just going to keep losing elections. So
So
that is what Trump did for the Democrats. Like like I think I told you this when he got elected the first time. Like he's a president that America deserves, right? And I agree. I feel that way again. And it's not all roses and cherries, but again, he's the president that America deserves because of our unwillingness to compromise party to party, right? Like I think Shelby Foote said, like our greatest attribute is that we compromise. Our whole system of government, well, until recently, probably you would say, was built on compromise, right? We have checks and balances. We have, the House, the Senate, the presidency. So, however, over the last, say decade, that ability to compromise is gone.
So
So,
I disagree about that, at least in the first 2 years of Biden's administration. He had a half a dozen or more huge pieces of legislation that were all led by Republicans. Republican senator who, passed Cornyn passed the it was the mental health bill, but it was really a gun bill. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the couple times that they avoided the fiscal cliff, one time with when McCarthy was House Speaker, and the next time with Johnson as House Speaker,
yeah.
Ukraine funding, stuff like that. So there has been some bipartisan
So
pieces
you,
of like,
you pointed out two things there, like going off the cliff and Ukraine funding. I mean, to me, those are no brainers, right? Like, I don't care who's in office. Like, that would have happened. I believe that would have happened. Ukraine would have got,
with Trump too.
yeah, like Ukraine would have got funded. Like like you and I both know, like Ukraine, like we couldn't let Ukraine fall when they got invaded, right? Because if they would have rolled over Ukraine, the Russians, then NATO would have gone adios Pepe. And Trump can say all he wants about NATO, but he knows, and and I know that NATO ain't going nowhere.
I hope you're right. I'm not as confident that Trump would. Trump would basically the way that he would solve that problem. I believe, and I could be wrong, I hope I am wrong, is basically by giving Putin whatever the hell he wants, and ceding a significant amount of sovereign territory of a sovereign democratic nation to Putin in order to make that thing go away.
Well, I don't think he can't do that. Only Lazinski can do. I mean, whatever his name, not Lazinski.
Oh,
Zelensky.
President Zelensky. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I was thinking Lazinski because of her birthday.
yeah.
But I mean, only he really has the power to do that. Now, obviously, if we turn our back on him, then obviously then there's going to be a lot more seceded. But I mean, listen, at my core, being a Reagan Republican, I don't like the Russians, man. I mean, I don't mind Russian people, but I don't trust the Russian government. I don't trust the Russians, and I don't trust the Chinese either, for that matter. So I don't, and I think, I believe that he's the same way. You know,
So I think it's fair to say, and maybe you see it differently, that a significant percentage of people who consider themselves Republicans today, including a vast majority of those in elected office right now, as well as folks who are really tuning into conservative media, whether it's broadcasts like Fox and OANN or podcasts or websites, are not. They seem to be more Tucker, who's pro Putin,
yeah.
than Reagan conservatives, as you're describing it.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for the younger generation, like younger than me, younger than 50, maybe 20 to 35. I can't really speak for what they feel about Russia because I don't really know. But from the way I was growing up and the way that I've raised, my kids, is not definitely not to hate Russia, but to take them at arm's length, right?
Yeah,
And I think if history repeats itself, which it does, I mean, our history will show that Russia's a necessary ally when it is, and the rest of the time they're an enemy.
yeah,
They're an enemy of our state. They would like to see us fall, and that's whether Trump's in office, whether if Harris was in office, if you're in office, it doesn't matter. So getting back to that part of it of him seceding, sovereign land, it's difficult because we don't want to see free people. Ukraine are free people, right? We don't want to see a free people, fall like that. So I will say this though, like I'm not in agreement with pulling all of Ukraine's funding as Trump talks about, but this is where I'm at. Like he's still the best choice for what I'm seeing for the country.
right. So your concerns, you don't, you're not as concerned about some of the things that I'm concerned about with regard to Trump, and any concerns you do have are trumped, if you will, by much more significant concerns you have about the left. But what are your concerns when it comes to Trump? Do you have any?
Sure, I do. I mean, part of my concern with him is just his mouth, man. Like it's just the stuff he says, man. Sometimes it's just like, there's I don't know. I know I like to reference movies a lot, but there's a character in Goodfellas, the guy that talks all the time, Maury, who's looking to get his money,
Yeah,
and they're talking about, you think Maury says this and you think Maury says that, and Ray Liotta's telling De Niro, he talks so much nobody even listens, nobody cares what he says, everybody just wants him to shut up. That is my issue with Trump, right? Is that you can't, at face value, you can't really take him seriously most of the time because he's talking out both sides of his mouth, right? So, but however, I don't think it's unique to him or to a president. Now, I don't think they all do that, but they all are master politicians. So, you can have video on anybody, any Democrat, any Republican saying one thing when the wind blows and saying the other thing when the wind blows. But with him, he's so divisive in the stuff that he says, and he gives so much bait to the left that sometimes I wish he would just shut up, and just run it through policy and do what he's doing without, like peeing in the Cheerio, so to speak.
yeah,
He just, he's like spiking the ball. I would say this, like if he scored a touchdown on a 5-year-old, he'd spike the ball in their face, So like, there's a need for that, but there's also not a need for that because it doesn't help, it doesn't help unite. And as the president, as commander in chief, I mean, that is part of, in my belief, is part of his job description to help unite the country. Now, obviously, we're not united right now, but we haven't been. And it's not just because of him. So I think it goes far back as far as getting Obamacare rammed down our throats, as Republicans, as I felt in a back room Tammany Hall type of way. That made me really have a disdain and distrust for the Democrats that I didn't have before that. Only because, listen, I don't have a problem with, the Affordable Care Act. I just had a problem with the way it came about, and that I felt like I was deceived, and I knew it the whole time. So that's kind of where I look at my distrust for the left is, they will lie and cajole and steal to get whatever they want done. And they're basically the party of the entitlement. And that's why you have such a division, because, so many people feel entitled to so much right now. I feel on the left that they just literally cannot deal with the fact that they're not getting their way. When Republicans are, we're pretty used to it, man. But we pick up and we revamp and we try again.
So some of our listeners are like yelling at their their apps right now, or the YouTube right now. So they're like, "What are you talking about? That's crazy." But I do, and we listen. We'll have plenty of time. We'll go to docs. We'll hash some of this stuff out. You maybe we'll put out all hands on deck at docs and join us for a more extended version of this conversation. But I do want to introduce another aspect to this, if you don't mind. And that is, I think it was about 15 years ago that we met.
Yeah.
We met at a Bible study that Brandon was leading, and that's a whole other conversation. But I bring it up because I wonder if you're concerned at all about the influence that Trumpism, this moment in time, the kind of the elevated political, religious style rhetoric, the impact that that's had on the American church, at least the churches that we're most familiar with.
No, I'm really not worried about it, only because, like, he's Trump, he's not God. Like,
I mean, that's for you, but what about, I mean, you have to admit, like a lot of the fellows that we were studying with, a lot of guys that we went to church with, a lot of guys I went to church with at Grace, I've come to the conclusion that they've confused their political preferences and social positions for as the top priority. So when we come across, if we were sitting in that Bible study, and it happened with,
Yeah.
I forgot his name, but it happened a couple times where we were reading scripture. I'm like, oh baby, this don't look good for you boys who are like, I don't know, closed border or something like that. Or there are certain times when scripture was telling us something that was different than some guy's political preference. So I think the political preference has taken priority over what scripture, is screaming out at us sometimes.
Yeah,
So
I think that's on an individual basis. If you want to put your political beliefs above, what the word is telling you, that's obviously you're right. So I don't really see it. I don't really see it in the church as a whole doing that. If that's the question you're asking, I don't see that right now. Listen, like, Trump's only here for 4 years, man. Like, he's only here for 4 years. So, like,
I'll believe that when I see it. I think he's going to take a look at that. What is it, the 22nd or the 24th? He's going to take a look at that and be like, yeah, we don't need that.
no, I don't see it. Listen, he's not really breaking any ground in that aspect. It's not like he's Abraham Lincoln or FDR or anything like that. So, I don't even think he would call himself that. I haven't seen him say it yet, but he might say it. But I don't think he's that type of president. And we're not in wartime, so I think if wartime does happen, I could see that slippery slope going that way, because there is precedent for it. So, but I don't see it yet, as far as that goes. And as far as, like, the religious right, I'm not too concerned with them. They're going to vote to the right. Really, no matter who's the president. They're going to vote there because their values are represented more on the right than the left, except for maybe the Catholics.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily just about the way they vote. It's about the culture of the churches that we've been a part of.
Right.
That there's, you know, I guess I guess we see that differently. I am concerned that pastors are having to defer to the preferences and priorities, and in some cases, let's be honest, prejudices of the loudest voices in their pulpits.
Let's make something clear. Pastors defer to the people who donate the most. That's just the way it is, man. And usually, to your point, those people are the loudest ones.
Yeah.
Because they're putting the money in the coffers. So I mean, I don't think the right has the religious right has. They definitely have influence. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think I don't think Trump's running roughshod over them, or they're going to run roughshod over the party. And I know probably a lot of people would disagree based on what happened in the Supreme Court, but I mean the Supreme Court's a whole bigger issue, which is another reason that I'm very happy that I voted for Trump, because listen, I mean, the liberals were what they call it, lawfare, right? Legislating through lawfare is what I have seen, over the last several years. That has all gone away, right? So I wanted a conservative Supreme Court. I got that. So now, not to say that I wanted Roe v. Wade to go away, but I did want it to go back to the states. And that's really all that happened. It's a state issue now. And I think that's where the liberals missed the boat when it came to the national election, is they tried to tie it to the national election when it clearly was on their state ballots. So it wasn't a national election issue. Although if you're watching, you could not help but watch any of the commercials, that were on before the election. They were on 24/7. They were tying it to that. And I think they missed the boat there because it had already sailed. So you're not going to be able to undo what that did until, for at least, I mean, I'm hoping a generation as far as the Supreme Court goes.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned. I think the picks that he made in his first term, Amy Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Gorsuch, are from the conservative legal movement. And they are more reflective of, I call them Mitch McConnell's picks, much more so than Trump's picks.
Right.
I'm a lot more concerned about him appointing someone like Eileen Cannon to a seat, because she's not from the conservative legal movement. She's from a political.
I think you glitched out there. What was the name you said?
Eileen Cannon, the federal judge who's overseeing the documents case in Florida, because she's from the political legal movement. She wouldn't call it that,
what case in Florida?
What?
I said, what document case in Florida?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's exactly it. I think she used some really questionable maneuvers that made the legal thinking for Roe v. Wade look sound, look like, excellent legal precedent in order to dismiss that case. She basically used, it wasn't even a precedent. It was an offhanded remark that Justice Thomas made that she used as the entire theory to dismiss the entire case. Yeah. So that's not conservative. That's not from conservative legal philosophy. That's a political legal philosophy. I would not be as much of a fan of appointments like that to any federal bench, let alone the Supreme Court. But I realize we're already bumping up against some time here, and I promised you that we wouldn't go too long. So I want to ask you a couple more questions here. One is what I call the TP&R question, and we'll have plenty more time over beers or drinks or bourbon or whatever to hash this out. But I do want to ask you again the TP&R question. What do you think each of us can do to be able to share space with, have better conversations with, perhaps even to nurture relationships with people across our differences? So that's people with different backgrounds and beliefs than we do, who get their news from different sources than we do. How can we do better at talking politics and religion without killing each other, or is it even possible?
I think look in the mirror and realize you have two ears and one mouth, and to listen more than you talk. That's Bible actually. But I really believe that. I think you're a good example of that. For me anyways, you've been a good example to me for that. Because I can, tend to be a blowhard and roll over to get my point across when I want to. But however, I think, not just hearing, but listening more than we talk to people who don't agree with us, and to remember that we still are all Americans. Like the many times that I've gone in public debate, I get a lot from the left, like, "Oh, what are you? Oh, you want to kick my ass? You want to beat me up?" Now, like, no, man, like, you're American. I'm American, man. Like, we got it made, dude. Like we're the top 1%, man. Like, and like we got first world problems, right? But we are Americans. So I think, to me, like, I've been trying to understand, like, listen, like, when I called you the day after the election. Like, it wasn't to claim victory. It was to help you deal with, which I knew was a big disappointment to you, right? It wasn't to gloat. It wasn't to, talk smack. It was like, hey, like, how can I talk my friend Corey through this time in his life, right? So how can we as Americans help other Americans get through this time that is very difficult, and like, realize that it's still the greatest country in the world as far as I'm concerned. And as long as we can realize that and really try to listen to what other Americans who don't think same way that we do are saying, that I think we can get back to that. I mean, it's going to take a while because there's a lot of rancor, and there's like, I think it's divided as I've ever seen the country since I've been alive. But we have been more divided than this in our past. Okay. And there's been shedding of blood. There's been war that's gotten us through it. But we have been more divided than this in our past. And so we can come back from it if we look at the past and how they did it. And I think the way they did it was what I just said, listening more than you talk, and listening, and having some compassion for, because listen, I don't think the left, I don't want to throw all the left's values out with the bathwater. Like, I do believe on face value, it's a party that's a little bit more compassionate, that takes a little bit more of the human side than just the dollar and cent side, so to speak, as I do as a Republican. Do I think, I'll just break this off right now. Do I think there's a place for illegal immigrants? I do think there's a place for them, but it has to be done legally within the law, not just, trying to pull at my heartstrings and this isn't fair and that's not fair. I mean, I've read the Bible a lot of times. I haven't seen fair in there. I don't think really ever. And life itself is not fair. So I think if you try to legislate fairness into everything, you just have nonsense mess and everybody pissed off, man. So, like, realizing that life's not fair, and that we're not always going to get along, but we can sit at the same table and talk to each other, because we're human beings and we're Americans, and we should be able to figure this out because we're pretty awesome people, I think.
Yeah. That's good stuff, man. I appreciate that. Yeah. And we have had some pretty hearty conversations. I always know that I need to back off a little bit when I get you talking to the ceiling. Oh,
That's usually at a poker table, but I mean, I just want to make a comment. I think when you talk about the majority, I think, though, I don't know if you're going to ask this question, but I think what I'm seeing is from somebody like you who completely misread the election before it happened. I think there's a couple things there that weren't being seen, or maybe just recognized as being an issue that it was. And, I would say, yes, the economy, and yes, national security. But I think for the most part, man, it's an attitude of being told how to think, or you're evil, and I perceive that from the left, and that is what I rail against. When I say I hate liberalism, that's kind of what I mean in a nutshell, right? Like, well, if you are not for open borders, then you're racist. Okay. Okay. Sure. Like, whatever, or if you're not for, funding everything that comes down the pipe for wokeness or for whatever liberal agenda there is, then, I'm a homophobe. Like, stop. So I think that's what the country rebelled against. And that's why the country chose Trump, man, because he's definitely going to rebel against that.
yeah.
Like, I think it was time for that kind of stuff to go away. And I think that's why he got elected more than anything else. Because I feel like the majority told the left and the middle, by kind of, like I said, obliterating the middle at the ballot box. That's what was going on in the country. And, everything like you were saying, Jan 6 and this and that, like, there's a serious distrust of the left media and the left narrative that comes from the right, from the majority right now, that's been built up over years, listen, Trump's first administration, with the falsifying of the Russian stuff and the FBI and all that stuff, and you can tell me that he's been convicted, and he has been in a court of law in New York. And I give New York politics and law about as much weight as I do a feather. Like, it doesn't matter to me because I've seen it all be full of it, not only over the last 10 to 12 years, but there's precedent. Like, I feel like New York tries to run the country just like California does. And that's why I'm thankful for the Electoral College.
Yeah. Well, I will say that I do need to push back just a little bit. Like that case went through a grand jury, went through a jury.
Yeah.
They weren't, there were politicians, elected politicians, DA Bragg in particular, that were involved in the case. But at the end of the day, it was decided by a jury of his peers, of citizens. There, and just because they happen to live in New York, it doesn't mean they're any less American or should not be involved in a jury decided case. Just like
Yeah.
there would have been cases
I
in Florida
I
or
look at New
go ahead.
York, as being corrupt, just like I do in California. Like I think the state politics of California and New York are corrupt. I mean, I can say it because I live here in California. I don't live in New York, but I know the history of New York and what's come out of there for years. And to me, it was no different. So I look at it as a quasi kangaroo court. But and here's the point, Corey. Like to your point, he was convicted by a jury of his peers, but nobody cares.
Nobody cares. It's a perception.
The majority doesn't care. I'll tell you that. I mean,
Right.
obviously the minority cares. There's like 70 plus million people that do care. Don't get me wrong, but the majority of the people don't care. The majority of the people don't think that January 6th was an insurrection. They think it was a riot. Okay, like that's what they think. Now, you can say what you want, but that's what November 6th should have told the minority. As the majority doesn't care, they want to move on. You can say whatever you want. We've moved on. And I think also, we're getting around the table and talking with people is realizing that is over. Like it doesn't matter anymore. Nobody cares. So like, let's get about what people care about. And that's the border and the economy, man.
That's one of the most disconcerting things for me because I see that the peaceful transfer of power is so central to how our democratic republic works. But yeah,
There
clearly,
was a peaceful, it was, I mean, tanks weren't rolling in the streets, like politicians weren't drug out and dragged down the street by cars, like political dissidents didn't disappear and their families didn't disappear. Like, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, I see it as a bunch of pissed off Americans exercising their right. Like obviously a lot of them were convicted too, because I don't think, exercising your right means like, stomping down the Capitol halls looking for Pelosi. I don't think they had a right to do that.
yeah.
So like, but what I'm saying is how it's portrayed and how the majority perceives it, that the election they felt was stolen. I don't know if I agree with that. What I'm saying is I don't think it's as big of a deal as the left tried to make it. And they also hung their hat on that. And the country told them it didn't matter.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll leave that subject for, next time we go to docs. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I have a question for you. How are you feeling? Do you think the middle is gone, or do you think that you are leaning to the left, to the right? Like, how do you feel your political stance? Like, do you feel disenfranchised right now, or are you coming over that? Like, I mean, where are you at with where you're sitting party wise after the election?
Well, I'm certainly not registering as a Democrat, and I would definitely not register as a Republican right now, just because my political philosophy is still largely the same. As you described it, fiscally conservative, socially libertarian. Party. It's basically Reagan style conservatism. Um, you know, uh, Partner with our allies around the world who are committed to, sovereign democracies around the world. Be a shining city on the hill when it comes to foreign relations. Fiscal conservatism, balance our budgets. You know, have. It's not to say have no government because there's certain entities that are better at building roads when they work well. Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan and Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania have shown that.
Yeah.
That government can work well when it works well at doing what the government should do, such as building the damn roads, right?
Right.
So I do feel like there is a place, and if I'm not feeling alienated a little bit by the most obnoxious, loudest screamers from the loudest, most obnoxious MAGA hat wearing people and the loudest, most obnoxious AOC following squad oriented people, I should feel alienated by them. because sometimes I'm going to end up voting for a Suzette Valladares, who's a Republican, and
Yeah.
guys like Pete Dominic are going to give me endless kind of crap for it, you know. But sometimes I'm going to vote for our U.S. Congress member, who's now, or the Congress member elect, George Whitesides, who's a Democrat, because the prior one voted to overturn the elections of other states,
Right.
the fairly held, secure elections of Pennsylvania and Arizona. And to me, despite how I've gotten to know Mike Garcia now a little bit more over the last few months, and I respect his background. I respect the fact that he was in the Navy. He was a fighter pilot. He went to Annapolis. There's a lot that, and he's just a decent guy when you talk to him. But to me, those votes on January 6th and January 7th were disqualifiers. So to me, just because I voted for the U.S. Congress member, to me, I can't walk into Grace Baptist Church. I can't walk into certain churches. I can't walk into gatherings of people whose kids went to Trinity without some guys looking at me like I'm some, lefty flag waving, rainbow flag waving, whatever. Just because of that one vote. So I should feel alienated by the extremists from
Right.
whatever side, right?
Right.
But I do think that there's a place. It's not the critical mass that I would like, but there is a place for people who want good conservative, like classical conservative or classical liberal leaning news and analysis, the way that the Dispatch does, the way that the Bulwark is a little bit more commentary, but the way that the Bulwark does. The Bulwark is not going to unseat Fox News anytime soon as a prominent media force for general audiences, but there is a place for that kind of thinking that's more plugged into historical conservatism like Edmund Burke, or more recent historical conservatism like William F. Buckley, or in the spirit of compassionate conservatism like a Jack Kemp.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a place for that. Just like I think there's a place for moderate left leaning, the way that Bill Clinton legislated. So I don't know. I do think there's a place, but it's certainly not the critical mass. And I think it's, for now, the screamers in this instance that supported Trump and the extremists that supported Trump convinced more people than the centrists would have wanted to,
See,
or certainly than the left would have wanted to.
more people to vote for Trump than he did.
What?
I think the left convinced more people to vote for Trump than he ever could have.
I think that's a fair point.
I
Yeah.
mean, and I'll say this too. I mean, I think the left needs to learn that just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right.
Just because you what?
just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. You know,
Yeah.
be offended all you want, man.
Yeah.
Like, but just because you're offended does not mean you are correct.
Well, to your point, when I had that argument with Pete two or 3 years ago, after she was running for the assembly to get reelected in the assembly,
Yeah.
he just made me want to support her that much more because he wasn't making cogent points. He was fighting with me because I did not check off a box of orthodoxy, of liberal or left leaning orthodoxy the way he wanted me to, and the fact that he was a jerk about it. He wasn't making cogent points. He was just being a jerk. He was just being angry. And he made me dig into Suzette's background that much more. I ended up getting to know her. And
Yeah.
because of his jerkishness, it led me to be a really, really passionate supporter of hers. Because I want to hang with the likes of Suzette a lot more than I want to hang with the likes of Peter, at least the way he behaved that way that day.
I think
So
it's a good point for Republicans, man. Like if I could say that, like as far as my attitude going towards liberals, like I would like to have more like my arm around liberals, and the fact of like not saying scoreboard, like I said scoreboard the first week, but now it's about moving forward, man. Like because what has been going on in this country has been a weakening from within because of our failure to compromise, our failure to put our arms around each other. And doesn't mean I have to like you. Like I cannot like plenty of people. Like I don't have to like everybody in my life, man. Like I just don't. But I can listen to what they have to say and think about it in terms of my life, my sphere and influence, my company, my family, so on and so forth, without throwing everything out with the bathwater. I think that's on both sides. That's just ignorant, and it leads to a stalemate, and it leads to a lot of unhappy people, man. Like, so I think for me, like doing this without, having my MAGA hat on and like, like that kind of stuff. Like it's just, there's no place for it anymore, man. And it's been enough of it. I think hopefully from the right, that it can be more of a I don't know, more of a ease into the next 4 years instead of ramming it down the left's throat just for the sake of ramming it down their throats, because that's not productive. And I believe that was happening to the right when Biden was the president.
Yeah.
And that's why the left got Trump, because they deserved
it. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, listen, man, I really appreciate you doing this. Looking forward to continuing the conversation. And we did cover a lot, but is there anything important we haven't discussed you'd like to add?
I just think realizing the only thing I would add, I touched on it lightly, is I think the real reason that the majority won is getting back to a couple of things, right? Core values of a family, as far as conservative families considered, as far as that goes, that being important, the economy being important, and immigration being important, and in tying immigration to the economy. As far as why we, like in California, we have such a strain here. Everything's so expensive here because of our influx of illegals.
Mm-hmm.
And not to look at that in the aspect of, you're a racist, or I'm just trying to look at it as black and white. Like, as a business owner, we look at things black and white. So I see there's too many mouths to feed, right? That aren't paying tax, so on and so forth. But I would say that I would think that should be looked at from the left as to what really was going on. They may not like why, like the tax of that, as far as illegal immigration, they think it's racist. Okay, I understand that, but you still have to look at it from a black and white standpoint. Okay, and you have to look at that as far as it goes to national security, and that's what was important to people. And I think if the left figures that out, then they'll get the White House back a lot sooner than they think they will.
Mm. Good stuff, man. Well, I really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you in the next couple of days. We'll have to do a docs run and, like I said, continue the conversation. Thanks again.
All right, man. GFY.
And as always, if you dig what we're doing here, remember to follow the show, write that review, and now you can watch these conversations on YouTube. Support us on Patreon. It's youtube.com/@politicsandreligion. And the Patreon is similar, patreon.com/politicsandreligion. Check them all out. Subscribe, get some TP&R swag. And your support really does make a difference. So thank you for all of it. Now go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week.